friends. Welcome to another episode of the Repro Film podcast series, the one where I, your host, Asha Dahya, have the privilege of interviewing filmmakers, activists, and organizers in the repro space as a way to share important messages about reproductive health and justice at a time when we are staring down the barrel of Roe-pocalypse. But seriously, folks, at the time of this recording, it is early June and we are all collectively bracing ourselves for the Supreme Court ruling on the Dobbs v. Jackson case that is set to overturn Roe v. Wade. While there is a lot of uncertainty right now, one of the ways we want to share hope is to give listeners and our repro film community bite-sized pieces of action through our monthly periodical newsletter, which you can subscribe to at reprofilm.org. Today's episode does exactly this, lays out the current situation in very alarming detail, but it will also end with action items you can take to ensure bodily autonomy is a reality for everyone seeking an abortion. I'm thrilled to be in conversation with filmmaker Andrea Raby, director of the short documentary Undue Burdens, and Marie Khan, the director of operations for Midwest Access Coalition, who is featured in the film. Originally released in 2019 and made in response to the heinous abortion bans that were being introduced in Georgia and Alabama at the time, yet being even more relevant than ever in 2022, funnily enough, Undue Burdens is a film about the women that have stepped in to help others when the laws do not. In 2017, more than 5,500 people traveled from out of state to terminate a pregnancy in Illinois. Trap laws, targeted regulations of abortion providers, and other restrictions wreak havoc on Midwestern states, causing pregnant people to have to travel hundreds of miles to the nearest clinic. Sometimes there are waiting periods, which means staying in a different city for multiple days. When time off work means not getting paid, many people struggle to deal with the cost of accessing this procedure. That's where funds like Midwest Access Coalition come in, filling a hole in the funding gap that so many pregnant people need. But these abortion funds look starkly similar to something else, something that existed even before Roe v. Wade. The Chicago Abortion Counseling Service, nicknamed Jane, formed in 1969 out of a need to connect women in Chicago to the abortions they so desperately needed. They were a radical organization that provided over 11,000 illegal abortions and even started doing abortions themselves. But they weren't necessarily people who considered themselves heroes, quote unquote. They were housewives, students, and working women that saw a need and mobilized to be part of the solution. Undue Burdens follows Midwest Access Coalition, a practical abortion fund that helps people traveling to, from, and within the Midwest as they organize to provide people with funding for travel, hotel stays, childcare, and food, and help women access abortions through the Midwest and beyond. Looking back at Jane, we can see how powerful women can be when they band together to make something happen. Undue Burdens compares these two organizations, one that existed out of necessity because of the illegality of abortion, and the other that exists out of necessity because of the failure of our legislature. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Andrea and Marie and leave feeling like you have practical ways to support the movement going forward in spite of our current situation. Well, thank you both for joining me today, Marie and Andrea. It's really wonderful to be speaking with you on this auspicious occasion. At the time of this recording, obviously, we are still waiting to hear whether the Dobbs Supreme Court case opinion will come out, not the leaked one, but the real one. So we're still waiting on edge. But in the meantime, I'm really thrilled to be speaking with you both. And Andrea, I want to start with you and thank you for making this film, because it really is a timely reminder not only how far we have come since pre-Roe days, i.e. before 1973, but also how far we are going to go back, which is terrifying and a little bit depressing. I'd love to find out, Andrea, what was your initial motivation for making Undue Burdens, and how did you first come across Midwest Access Coalition?
Yeah, so I first got connected or heard about the story of the Janes at, I think I was just at like a talk or something here in Chicago. And it was like, oh, this local kind of Chicago history of this group that provided underground abortion access, and was like, that's cool. Why have I never heard of that before? And so got a book that is the kind of comprehensive book about Jane, and read that and was like, this is incredible. That people just kind of came together and were like, this is what we have to do. Let's provide access because people need it. But was also like, how do we look at this through the lens of today's access to care? Because it is like, I mean, I made this film and it came out in 2019. And even then it was like, we're sliding backwards a little bit. Like things are starting to, we have a lot of abortion bans happening. And like, so how do we look at it through today? And I was talking about this with a friend who's also a filmmaker. And she was like, you should check out Midwest Access Coalition, their practical support fund. And I was like, what's that? And so I was learning a lot as I was kind of researching and going through pre-production, which was awesome, and learned a lot about what MAC did, and then approached them, had a couple meetings, and was like, I would love to do this in a way that kind of compares like what practical support looked like pre-Roe and what it looks like now, and what that sort of process is helping people get to their medical appointment. So yeah, that's how it started. And then it was just kind of a process of like filming MAC, trying to figure out what we could film, because so much of it is like on the phone or like doing emails and like just trying to get people from point A to point B, and then connecting with different Janes and seeing who I could interview, who's in Chicago, who's around the country, and kind of getting that story of their process of setting up this group and doing underground abortions. So yeah, it was a really, really cool process. I learned a ton, and I'm so happy that I'm connected with MAC now because I love the work that they do.
Well, I think you did a great job of really showcasing what the work is. You know, as an audience member, I got a sense of this is who the volunteers are, this is how they work. You know, they call people, they connect them, they get them access and get them to where they need to go to get care. So I really loved the way that you showed that throughout the film. And I also would love you to kind of explain the significance of the title, Undue Burdens, for people that may not be familiar with the term.
Yeah, absolutely. So the undue burdens standard is kind of a standard within legal proceedings. I think it's for other things too, but it comes up a lot around abortion because it's like, is this a burden that is too much to be placed on someone when they're seeking abortion care? So kind of the thought for the title being Undue Burdens is like, what burdens are placed on people every day when they're seeking this care, despite this legal precedent? Like, there is a burden clearly that we have placed if people are traveling out of state to access abortion care. But then also, what is like the burden that's placed on us, the people that are going, this is a problem and we need to help and we need to fix this, and what are these organizations that are kind of taking that burden and saying like, we're going to help? So it's a play on the legal precedent, the legal term, but also how can we help relieve this burden that is placed on people?
Yeah, that seems to only be getting heavier, sadly. Marie, it's lovely to see your face, and we're recording this on video. Obviously, people are listening to it audio only, disclaimer. You are in the film and you talk about Midwest Access Coalition, and we got to see some of your team in action. And first of all, I want to thank you for the incredible work that you guys are all doing, many of whom are volunteers. I'd love to find out how MAC's work has changed significantly since the Texas SB 8 6-week ban, which the Supreme Court allowed to remain in place at the end of last year, and now with the Dobbs case at the Supreme Court. How has your work changed in light of those laws?
So and thank you so much for including me along with Andrea. So with Midwest Access Coalition, our mission is to provide practical support for folks traveling to, from, and within the Midwest. And we were deliberate about that because we know some folks, because of certain states in the Midwest who either historically or in the present day are working to shore up abortion access. There's some states Midwestern people come to outside of the Midwest for care. So when Texas happened, there were Texans, and there are still Texans that are coming up to Kansas to access abortion care, that are coming to central and southern Illinois, to Chicago. And that is because of where abortion clinics are allowed to exist in this country, where laws have enabled them, or at least not put in enough barriers that that there's clinics able to be there. So Mac immediately saw, because again, these are Texans coming to the Midwest. So this isn't a Texan traveling within the state where another Texan there on the ground is going to have information on travel, is going to know all the info for the environment they're going to. When you're coming to a different region of the country, there are different things to be aware of and know of and understand, even if it's sometimes just knowing like where the time zones change and shift.
Yeah.
So we saw we immediately saw Texans that were contacting us. At that point, Texans were also going to Oklahoma for care. That wasn't a state yet that has the ban now in place that's limiting that. So we provided support for Texans. We synced up with Texas practical support orgs like Fund Texas Choice to figure out, okay, how can we work here within our existing parameters to do the least damage? Because we're all trying to work together. As you mentioned, we're mostly volunteer. We have 2 full-time paid staff and 2 part-time. And that's been basically since COVID, when the realization of, this area of abortion practical support needs to be funded and looked at. And what we saw with Texas is the immediate groundswell of folks finding us, folks reaching out to their provider that's now located in the Midwest because they can't go to a clinic in Dallas. And that Midwestern provider who normally refers Midwesterners to us is like, oh yes, Midwest Access Coalition is an option for you. And while everything that's been done to Texas is disgusting, and the way it's just been ignored by folks like that, how Andrea mentioned, that's an undue burden. That is not access.
Right.
If one could prescribe any sort of bright spot to Texas, I think it gave those of us in activist spaces an opportunity to see what is going to be coming and what we're going to see. Those of us in reproductive justice communities, especially, because we've known this and we've known the movement that's had to occur in our region due to racism, due to lack of care in a myriad of areas, not just abortion. But now we're seeing the other parts of the country, like Texas has its own racism. It's had its own horrible environment that allowed this to percolate and people that allowed this to happen. And now we're seeing it spill over into other states, which is this terrifying concern. So the Texans, we're seeing folks, we've had folks that have come up and, for example, from Louisiana, we've seen folks in New Orleans, all those spaces that in COVID were hitting, where states tried to limit and close down abortion care. They said, oh, this isn't emergency care. This isn't care that has to occur right now. It can be waited on. We saw what that happened and that it forced folks to travel north. We saw the same thing with Texas. So our biggest concern now is, how are we going to be able to support the people, and how do you decide who's worthy of support, quote unquote? Which is a disgusting, horrific question to subject anyone to. And what we saw and what we ended up doing that the system we came up with Texas is we developed much closer relationships with the funds that were already down there. And we figure out ways, okay, can we cost share on this? We have this information. We know how to do this really fast. Can we support these folks upfront? And then you all can come in and assist with the costs. So it's a lot of those types of overarching relationships to try to continue to provide this patchwork substitute for medical care, because this isn't happening. Like our medical care should include transportation. It should include safe housing. It should include all these pillars of basic human rights, and it doesn't happen. And we know that the need is only going to grow, especially as we have states go dark within the Midwest too. Like there's our own states that we're worried about Wisconsin, this law from 1972. And while this is happening, we're going to have Florida with limited access. We're going to have South Carolina with limited access, all these states that are going to be going down and going dark. And there's going to be so few that people can go to, that it's terrifying. When Kentucky went dark for a couple of days, about a month ago, I want to say now, we immediately saw Kentuckians that were calling to try to get care in Illinois, to try to get care in Michigan. And we know that that's just going to continue and keep on happening as these other states go dark, not within the Midwest, but with folks that are going to end up needing to come to the Midwest for care.
And does that necessarily mean that they will get to see a doctor or a medical health professional, even though they travel? Like, that's obviously going to put more, waiting lists are going to be longer in places where they're offering service.
That is a really big, terrifying concern, because the statistics, even being conservative, it's estimated that there's going to at least be an increase of about 45 to 60,000 abortions that are going to need to be able to be performed in Illinois. So we know that we don't have the structure to support all of the Midwest, let alone folks from other cities, other states that are going to need to come up. And the way we work within practical support, and I would say probably most practical support orgs, kind of the bare first requirement you need to get synced up for practical support is to have the appointment booked. Because then we know, okay, this is how many days you need to stay at a hotel. This is the distance you're going to need to travel. This is how many days you need to have babysitting provided for. And what this delay is going to force on people is that they're not maybe going to have the abortion they want, the abortion experience they want and deserve. Maybe they're going to need to look into medication abortion and utilizing pills when perhaps they'd like to be pregnant longer and go talk to someone at a brick and mortar clinic. None of that's going to be available for folks. You're going to have one shot. You're going to have a small window for you to get scheduled for your abortion, or for you to get your medication abortion set, the pill option in the US, which it's usually 10 weeks or less, folks take it with medical guidance. Abortion pills are incredibly safe, but you're pigeonholing people into specific time windows when they get to access care. And if you're now when in this situation, we now there's clinics that are 3 weeks out booked, 4 weeks out booked for care. Those are clinics that are seeing folks in a myriad type of pregnancy context, folks that have comorbidities, that their pregnancy is literally killing them. And because of the state they live in, they can't go to their hospital to get care because heaven forbid state Medicaid should cover someone, experiencing a pregnancy that's killing them. Like that's all off the table. People can't do that. And people need to really understand this. So those folks are traveling to other states to try to get care for abortion and miscarriage care at abortion clinics and at hospitals. And there's an incredibly limited number of appointments. We only have so many abortion doctors. There's, and as we've seen, and I know your pod discusses the laws and the regulations that states try to put in place requiring that doctors have ambulatory admitting privileges at hospitals. Not necessary. Requiring that people be MDs, OBGYNs to provide abortion care, midwives, doulas. Like we are entirely dishonoring the entire Indigenous, Black, queer communities that have come together to support those experiencing birth, those experiencing pregnancy loss, those making the choice for an abortion or needing to have an abortion for their own care. And what we're going to see is people that can't access brick and mortar care, hospital care, that should be able to access that care. And we're going to see people that are never even going to get close to accessing that because appointments are going to be too filled up. And it doesn't enable someone who's working, who's parenting individuals, who's a caregiver, who's in a great relationship. I mean, these are all people in ideal spaces. It's still hard to get an abortion. What's going to happen if you are in a context of domestic violence, if you are in a context of abuse, if English is not your primary language? Like all of these create these huge undue burdens that get put in front of people. And we know this, like we can predict these. We have statistics on these. We know the types of communities pregnant people are coming from and what their needs are, but we don't want to fund this on a government level. We take very cruel tactics to make sure people get deprived of medical care. And when all else fails, we fall back on racism, we fall back on sexism and misogyny. And at the end of the day, that person doesn't get the abortion they need, that person doesn't get to be seen by the doctor that they deserve to get to see, all of that.
It's terrifying to think that a lot of these things, like you mentioned, have already been burdens and barriers that people are experiencing, and it's only going to get exponentially worse. And it's all by design, it's just really horrendous because it's people that, on the margins that are really going to be affected the most. And we're ensuring that people stay in classism and poverty. And we're ensuring also that more people will now be swallowed up and caught within those economic margins that people are in. We're not baby formula, all the things to allow people to continue and have healthy existing families isn't being provided for. So then to force someone to remain pregnant or to seek out an outcome for their pregnancy that isn't what they would like to do, that is just an added, screw in the coffin of what is being done to these folks. Like how are you able to back yourself out of a space that you're in economically when now you're forced to give birth to a premature child at a hospital that isn't going to survive? And you weren't able to get that abortion care you wanted the whole time. Now you have this big hospital bill that you have to deal with, or don't. What happens when you don't deal with it? Like we know all of these medical bills are one of the big primary causes in this country that force people into debt if they are not in debt at that point. And we're just setting people up for failure. We're forcing families to be created, from a very
cis hetero white lawmaker perspective, and we're doing nothing for those individuals.
It really goes to show how, what the Janes had set up was, the idea of access to abortion is a human right. I mean, it is a human right. And what the Janes were doing really was trying to bring that idea of human rights back and dignity back. And Andrea, I want to ask you about some of the Janes that you featured in the film. A lot of them, a few of them had shared their perspective on, going what it looks like to go back and see these horrendous abortion bans being put into place. It reminds me of the inevitable sign that we see at many women's marches saying, I can't believe we still have to protest this shit, which is, I get depressed seeing those signs because it's like, is my daughter going to have to be holding up a sign, in future years? I'd love to find out what was the most eye-opening comment or confession from some of the original Janes that you'd heard, that whether it was in the film or not, what was something that you learned from them?
Yeah, I feel like probably the most impactful for me was bringing the scene kind of close to the end of the film, bringing Eileen Smith, who was one of the Janes, to kind of meet with some of the folks from MAC and talk about access and like what, from her perspective, like how Jane operated and how MAC operated and how those are very similar. And it's eye-opening and disgusting to have someone be like, I was so part of this. And then when Roe happened, they were very much like, well, if we keep operating, it's going to be medical malpractice. So we're done. It's all solved. It's good. And see Eileen basically be like, maybe I should get involved with MAC. And like so many years later is like, it's part depressing, but part like this like kind of second gen feminist wave, I think does need to like stay involved and stay part of this, because it's like we do have to keep fighting. And I do think too, the Janes were primarily white women helping a very different population, primarily women of color, primarily women from the South Side of Chicago. And I do think it's very encouraging now to see like MAC led by like women of color, queer women, like this movement in reproductive justice is like being led by these people that are like seeing all these issues, seeing how it's all interconnected and saying like, no, we have to like stop, look at this as an all-encompassing, like what you were just saying, how poverty and how like access to baby formula, it's all connected. And so I think it's really interesting to see the Janes and older women that were part of this movement back in the 70s and the 60s be like, we still have to protest this, but also like, let's look at everything else and see how it's all connected. And so I think that's happening. And I think, unfortunately, we're here now, and Roe was already kind of possibly on the chopping block, but at least we have people now that are looking at these issues in the way that is hopefully going to help people as addressing full economic problems, as opposed to let's just get a person an abortion.
Right. Let's look at the reproductive justice content, even if you don't want to call it reproductive justice, but that includes like the ability to like safely parent, and that includes the economics behind it. And acknowledges that someone who is terrified about being pushed into poverty, being into a place of poverty, that is as concerning of a concern around your pregnancy as someone who has experienced postpartum with prior pregnancies and they're worried about that. Like economic health is important to someone in addition to physical health. All of these affect someone's ability to parent, to continue a pregnancy, all of this.
Yeah, it's all connected. Yeah. I really love the reproductive justice framework because it is holistic and it shows that it's such a bigger ecosystem than just, do you have access to abortion and you don't want to be pregnant anymore? Maria, I'd love to talk about, with the Jane movement, there's, in a lot of protests and marches that we're seeing right now, there are people using like Handmaid's Tale costumes and holding up coat hangers and things like that. And I really want to mention that because a lot has shifted in terms of abortion access and knowledge, especially around medication abortion and FDA approval. I'd love for you to kind of explain what will be some of the main differences when Roe falls and why it's not going to be a, holding up coat hangers kind of environment anymore.
Exactly. Yes. The coat hangers are super damaging. Like I understand from a historic perspective, like they definitely have a time and place, and there's definitely like there's so much like history behind that. But as you've said, like medication abortion, which is a combination, it's misoprostol and mifepristone. It's a 2-pill combination. Sometimes you hear anti-abortion folks refer to them as a chemical abortion, quote unquote. It's literally just pills you take. Usually they're sublingual, so you put them in you have a advice of the medical provider, but you put them in your cheeks. Like this isn't an invasive procedure, and these are the options that are available for folks now. They do not need to consider or resort to any sort of harmful objects in their vagina, in their uterus, none of that. There are botanical options. There's medication abortion that's here and packaged together and available. And there's organizations like Aid Access, like Plan C, that assist and work with folks who maybe can access the pills legally in their state. And I say legally because of state requirements and legislation that different states use to try to attack abortion pill medication. And if someone can't access this in their state, there's mobile clinics, and there's other telemedicine providers that can work with folks to at least get them to their state's border or get them outside of the state in order to access these pills. And there's amazing grassroots activists on the ground that have medication abortion pills available, and will work with people, especially in these communities, like in our communities of color, where we know we've talked to each other and we know we can reach out and trust that particular person on that street. And we our hope, Max hope, we want all of that to continue. We want all of those structures to be in place, because as we've seen, assuming that the healthcare system is going to take care of this for us, assuming that our governor is going to legislate against this, it works in some states, sure, works right now, but it's by no means no one by no means, has blanket guaranteed protection at all. And so with this return to these concerns of coat hangers and Handmaid's Tale, it ignores the progress from which we've came from, which is great and which is monumental and which is like medication abortion pills, if someone's at that stage in pregnancy that they can utilize those, which in the US is 10 weeks or less, that is an amazing resource. And there's folks that are very creatively have found ways to get that and harness those. And we've worked on ways to have them legally provided to people. So there's always those options available for folks. The fear mongering and the imagery with the handmaid's costume is especially frustrating, because it's a great book. I love the book. It's awesome to read. But like, this has been the existence for so many people of color in so many spheres, not just reproduction, not just tied to family structures at all. And so to kind of bring this back as like a harbinger, it's like, this has already happened. This has already happened to so many people who weren't given a uniform to parade around in, that were enslaved, that fell because of genocide, that were forced to march in different parts of this country. So really letting go of those topics and focusing instead on, all right, where have we come from? What has our history shown us? We have medication abortion pills. We have practical support funds. We have abortion funds. We have mutual aid organizations. We have radical harm reduction spaces that are there that's like, harm reduction spaces are amazing to me. They see, hey, you need Narcan, you need safe crack kits, you need to have STI testing, you need to have abortion pills. Like all of this is wrapped up in the harm reduction conversation and how we should actually be meeting people where they're at with what they need in order to allow them to preserve their own life and to progress and continue living their lives without judgment. And what we see with these very like fear mongering and like approaches like that, I worry because it's not actually providing information to the pregnant people that are out there on the streets that you can use effectively. Like these messages of like, oh yeah, come to Colorado and camp with your auntie. First off, like, I'm South Asian. I'm not calling a white woman auntie. White women are not aunties. Like, get over it. It's also a term very much used by the Black community as well. Like, no. And so like information like that, when it's out there, I'm like, it's well-intentioned and I get it. And it's people saying, we're with you, we're worried about you. But at the end of the day, all that does is cloud the airwaves and creates confusion for pregnant people who need to know, where can I safely go to get my abortion at a clinic, at a hospital, by mail, by telemedicine? Where can I relax as my body is healing, is undergoing these processes? And, where can I get maybe emotional support after the fact? And I'm going back to my family, when I'm talking with my spouse, when I'm talking with other relatives, or maybe it's something someone needs to internally is going to be keeping to themselves, that they had an abortion. All those folks still need support. And being out in the streets in a handmaid costume does not help do that. And it's also not, it's in my opinion, honestly, not going to sway lawmakers' minds. Like these lawmakers do not care. And like, I really think that ship, it's sailed.
Yeah.
And it's not helpful to pregnant people that are trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah. I like that. I love that you just, made a distinction between what's helpful and what's not and what's more.
Yeah. A pink pussy hat does not do shit. A pink, there's a time and place for like rage.
Right.
And I fully get that. But at the end of the day, if it's not actually doing something for the people that are the most marginalized, that we know are the most marginalized, it's like, what's the point of that activism then? It's
just a Halloween costume at that point.
Exactly.
Speaking of the legal implications, I'd love to find out, Marie, for a second, how is MAC preparing for when Roe falls? How do you adapt to the new legal landscape? Like, are you consulting with lawyers? Like, how is that all going to work? Especially for patients who might be wondering, like, am I allowed to call an abortion fund? Am I allowed to call an access fund? Like, how does that work?
Right.
How is that going to work going forward?
Anyone's allowed to call an abortion fund an access fund. And when I say allowed, I mean allowed in the sense that you're not prevented from doing it. Now, as we saw with Miss Herrera down in Texas, with Lizelle Herrera, like she looked into resources. Presumably, she went to a doctor who chose to do this to her, to provide this cruelty. She went to an ER asking for care, needed medical care, and was instead, arrested and put into police custody. So, like, yes, people can legally access this information, reach out to us. But as we're seeing every day, it is becoming a more and more terrifying reality for folks that, if I go to the public library and if I Google abortion practical support resources, I've come here to print out my bus ticket, I'm getting everything set up for my trip next week. All of those are contexts and situations that have caused MAC to look at ways to expand the surveillance, or not surveillance, the tech tools that we have available for clients, and resources and information to help try to limit the state's surveillance as much as possible on people's bodies. When someone is pregnant, there are so many, the odds of violence being inflicted on a pregnant person are much higher than someone who's non-pregnant. When you are pregnant, there's a greater increase of domestic violence, of interpersonal violence. And at the same time, someone who maybe has been utilizing, getting checked at a local healthcare clinic, maybe they're using WIC or SNAP, other types of resources through their pregnancy. All of those things are things that get documented. So those are the scary things now, sitting back, and we've been thinking about this, but those are the things that especially are terrifying now, as we see states taking these really insidious routes to track and monitor pregnant people, and continue to do that. States know who might be pregnant. States know family structure. States work long and hard to try to get in here and destabilize homes that we see within our communities of color. And this surveillance is concerning. And yes, this means that we're working with other orgs that can assist with providing information that we especially don't want to try to confuse clients that are coming to us maybe with a burner phone, maybe without their own computer. They're operating in areas that aren't as tech resourced as others of us might be in. So working with folks to try to keep them as safe as possible while they're doing the work to figure out their options for abortion funding, where they're going to stay, all of this. And also we're working with law firms and lawyers, both within reproductive justice and reproductive access and outside of that. Because sometimes it's nice to have a fresh set of eyes of not different non-risk adverse lawyers in different spaces. But it's a concern. It's a huge concern, because we know we have folks working at funds that are in red states, that are in states that are looking to remove nonprofit status from abortion clinics, states whose elected officials send out letters and then post them on Twitter saying they're going to go after all the donors of abortion funds. Like this type of like direct coercion and fear mongering. Yes, all of it. And so, yes, it's something we're constantly watching. We're paying attention to, talking with lawyers, and we're hoping by staying as informed, we can be ahead of things enough that it'll give us a leg up and a chance to be there and be able to meet whatever legal problem is coming at us in the best way possible.
Yeah, well, if there's any way we can support, obviously by sharing, the resources and information that MAC is sharing, let us know.
people need to pay attention to who their attorneys general are. Some states elect, some states they have weird appointment things, but attorney generals are one of the key people that this is not even a political statement. Like, talk to your attorney general, find out, like, let them know these are my viewpoints on abortion, because that person has a lot of sway, especially in determining like lawsuits in states. And
maybe also Google your doctors and health practitioners to see if they're anti-choice.
Yes. Those of us with insurance that are privileged and resourced, like if you're able to go to your doctor and they are getting money from your insurance for your PAPs, for your mammograms, for all of this, find out maybe they can't do abortions in their state, but find out, are you actually pro-choice even, let alone pro-abortion? Are you actually supportive of this? Are you, as a doctor, are you out there, putting your title and your education on the line and saying, yeah, I'm an MD and I support abortion. I'm an advanced practice nurse practitioner and I support abortion. Like all of that needs to continue and be amplified, because folks are claiming they don't hear it. They're claiming, the majority of Americans don't agree with abortion. We know that is factually false, false.
Terrifying, but I think it's something to really be aware of and know. So I thank you for sharing that knowledge. And it's just the reality of where we're at. Andrea, I know that you and I we spoke earlier before this call, and you had mentioned that the film was originally filmed in 2019. And at that point, it was in response to the horrendous bills that were being passed in Alabama at the time. And there were a couple of other states. But of course, it's still and even more relevant now, Undue Burdens. So that's depressing, but also great to have a film like yours as a resource out there. I'd love to hear from your perspective as a filmmaker, how you hope documentaries like yours can potentially bring hope and stir people to action, trying to find ways to move forward rather than just thinking about the depressing part of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like the hope with this film was to expose or show people that are maybe the left-leaning Democrats, but haven't really engaged with this issue, that there is infrastructure here set up already that you can engage with, that you can volunteer for, that you can give money to, that will directly help people that are seeking abortions. And that this is even in Chicago, this is like a legacy of care that MAC is a part of. And they're doing such fantastic work. So I think the hope is with my documentary, and then I'm sure other documentaries that are about abortion in general, is to like bring this issue to the forefront of people's minds, because it is something that people get up in arms about when there's something in the news and then it falls off and they don't think about it again, but people are trying to access care every day. And so like become a donor to MAC, like a monthly donor. Like there are ways that you can support this work and really make a difference, because the infrastructure is already there. Like Marie was saying, we don't have to create the auntie network. This is not something that's real. The stuff already exists, and plug in where you can, find the abortion fund that's in your state, you're in your area, volunteer. Like I think that's the biggest thing that hopefully documentaries like this can expose to people, that there are ways that you can help, even if you can only give like $10 a month. That helps someone get a hotel room, hopefully, for their abortion. So
it really honestly does. Like one of the things I'm proud of MAC too, and a lot of practical support orgs, we try to really creatively meet people. So it might be Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, Zelle. It might be having cash for them at the clinic. It might be, you're going to have a volunteer driver because you're in a context that is concerning, scary, violent, and we're going to work with you on that. You're a young person. Like all of these things are situations where for that person, money may be able to solve, like in addition to all the other hurdles, trying to figure out how to book things, trying to get access to, trying to figure out how the Amtrak system works, how to figure out flying works. All of these are things that money is unfortunately needed for. And the donations we often see that I think it was Cosmo a couple of years ago, $525 was the standard cost for a medication abortion. When someone's traveling for that care, and if you're going to a state that mandates 2 visits like Ohio, or up to 4 visits like North Dakota, you need to your cost for housing, for a hotel, for food, it's way going to outweigh the cost for the actual stupid pills you're taking to terminate your pregnancy. And a lot of people, I think, don't realize that at first, like, oh yes, abortions are very expensive. Like if you're getting later care, this is easily upwards of 15, 20 grand. That's a horrific amount of money. If you're getting super early care, you are still having to pay for that hotel, travel for that gas, do all of that. So even small donations are incredibly helpful. Like that's food for someone. That's maybe they need prescription ibuprofen to help with pain management and their Medicaid won't cover it because they're from out of state. All of those things donations assist with. And on the ground volunteers are incredibly important for logistical planning and other types of direct client support that MAC does. And a lot of other practical support orgs across the country do.
Yeah, every dollar goes a long way. And even buying coffees, I was thinking like, donating money for meals or coffees and things like that. Andrea, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say too, like, I think I've had this conversation with people from MAC before, but like the biggest thing that I feel like I took away from making this film too is like, we can't rely on our lawmakers and our country in general to support abortion care the way it needs to be supported. Like we have to do this ourselves because Republicans are so hell-bent on taking this away from us that this is up to us. And so like we have to support one another in this issue, and we have to support where and when we can, whether it's working in it, whether it's volunteering, whether it's donating, attending a march, what have you. But like it's becoming more and more clear, even since 2019 when the film came out, more and more clear, like this is mutual aid is going to be the thing that keeps this going. It's not going to be relying on our lawmakers.
Yes.
And
a big thing too, I want to mention the why that mutual aid is, I think is especially incredibly important, is the state of banking in our country, which, not to get into it, but so many people are underbanked. So many folks do not have a debit or credit card with their name on it. And that becomes critical when it comes time to check into a safe hotel overnight, when it comes time to fly and you've never flown before and you're getting hassled and someone's like, well, what corresponding documents do you have with your name on? All these things create really, they're big points of stress and concern and anxiety for folks. And the number of people that have said, oh yeah, I got the money together for my appointment and I figured out gas funds and I'm just going to sleep in my car. Like that, it's a regular occurrence that people indicate to us that was their plan, like they're set to go, or they just assumed that would be what their option was. And they were looking for safe spaces to park in Chicago or whatever city they're in so they don't get hassled. And that is just, it's absolutely disgusting. And without having the mutual aid piece where you mentioned, Andrea, that's so key, because you do need you do need to be interacting with folks and meeting them where you're at. You can't just say, oh, here's an Uber gift card, that's fine. You don't know if that person has a smartphone. You don't know if that person's navigated Uber before. You don't know if they're able to request a ride safely to come and pick them up. You don't know if they're being monitored or observed. All these things that when someone isn't banked and isn't familiar in the lexicon of utilizing all of these financial resources, that's a huge hurdle for folks right off the bat trying to travel and access care and book a bus ticket online. You don't have a debit card. How are you going to book a Greyhound ticket online?
Yeah, there's so many little moving pieces that people need to be aware of when it comes to access. So yeah, very important. Thank you for sharing all that. Well, I want to mention that our Repro periodical and this podcast series is our way of trying to give people actionable items in bite-sized pieces. There's so much happening in the world today. It can be overwhelming, but there's always small things that we can do. It doesn't have to just involve money. There's so many different ways that we can all, get involved. So I'd like to end on somewhat of a positive note if we can. I'd love for you both to share what you hope to see in the future in terms of abortion access and the conversation surrounding it based on the work you are both doing individually as a filmmaker and as an activist.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just raising up abortion funds. I feel like this is the way that moving forward post-Roe, this is the way that people are going to access care. So find your local abortion fund, volunteer, give money, support them, send them a letter, like any way that you can support them and the work that they're doing is gonna help people access care that they need. And I feel like that's the biggest way that we're going to be able to move forward.
Yep, I agree. continue to elevate, focus on the networks that folks have been utilizing to get this care that are in existence, and ways to bolster and increase those networks' reach and strength, because we're all going to have to be supporting more people. And as I said, to people that are now going to be forced into levels of poverty that they didn't experience before. And they're going to try to navigate and figure out, and they're going to need to be met by all sorts of mutual aid structures to support them, not just related to pregnancy. Another area that is related to, or is somewhat related to, the power of elected officials that I've seen some success in is cities that have, I think it's been way too late in coming, but cities who have put up municipal funding for abortion access and care. Like we've seen cities like Austin, Texas, that have done some really awesome stuff in a state with legislators there that are out to stop them. So I think efforts that people can make also within their communities that support and let elected officials know, yes, we want municipal funding for menstruation products, for abortion, for Plan B, like not even just the abortion pill over the counter, like Plan B, for goodness sake, which is available for someone at any age in the US. It used to have an age limit of 13, and then that got put down a couple of years ago. Like Plan B should be out there for everybody. And if we could get municipal funding available that would recognize this, funding available for folks coming to that city that are seeking abortion care, regardless of whether they're a resident of the state, regardless of whether they're a citizen, quote unquote, all these super xenophobic lines that we try to draw to determine who deserves care, right, quote unquote. If we could really get municipal funding and tied up and there and available and working with these mutual aid networks that have been on the ground doing this, it would be something. It would be something that could help solidify and get a system going, a process going to get funding for people that are traveling for care.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think it's really important to be aware of who's up for election in your local city, and run for office. If you don't see anyone who's pro-choice and you're passionate, consider running for office. No pressure, but consider it. So I really love that. So where can folks find out more about Midwest Access Coalition, and where can people watch Undue Burdens?
You can go to midwestaccesscoalition.org. We have a website there, and all of our socials are linked off of that. I would say our Instagram, Midwest Access Coalition is the name of it. That's probably the most social messaging space right now. So yeah, that's where folks can definitely find us there. And then on we've been fortunate to be able to talk with awesome folks on podcasts and in especially local news sources. I'm from Wisconsin originally, so I'm always partial to talking to folks also within that area of the Midwest too. But yeah, our website's the best place, midwestaccesscoalition.org.
Great.
Yeah, and Undue Burdens is available to view on our website on undueburdens.com. There's also a lot of great resources there to a lot of abortion funds within the Midwest. We kind of compiled a list of abortion funds in your area. And there's a watch kit if you want to watch at home with your friends. There's some discussion guides, things like that, fun snacks you can make.
Ooh, I like that.
And things like that. Yeah.
Yes.
Came out during COVID, really. So we try to make it a nice viewing experience for people at home. So yeah, undueburdens.com, go check it out.
Come for the movie and the snack recipes, and leave with some actionable items. I love that. I think it's great combination. Well, Marie Khan and Andrea, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a wonderful, very informative conversation. We're living at a time where there's so much uncertainty, but I really admire the work that you're both doing, and we're really thrilled to have the opportunity to share it with our listeners. And so thank you, and best of luck in the future with your future endeavors.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Be sure to watch the film by heading to undueburdens.com, and support the work Marie and her team are doing by heading to midwestaccesscoalition.org. The Repro Film Podcast is executive produced by Mama Film, hosted and produced by me, Asha Dahya, edited by Kylie Brown, with original music by Paris Jane and Maurice Anthony. Our monthly periodical is programmed by Neha Aziz and written by Emily Christensen. Don't forget to sign up for our periodical at reprofilm.org and subscribe to this podcast series. I look forward to bringing you our next conversation next month. Bye for now.